sock that's remaining under the leather, and then put the morphine in the right foot, insert the IV into the left, and then I'll eventually be evacuated out to North Parking, and then from North Parking thrown in the back of the Ford Expedition, and then taken to Georgetown University Hospital. Being taken to that hospital is the seminal reason I know that the Lord is in direct control of who is in my life, for what reasons, and at what time. The attending physician at Georgetown University is Dr. Michael Williams. And prior to his assumption of duty at Georgetown, Dr. Williams had spent 2 years in a trauma fellowship, working under the direction of Marion Jordan and James Jang at the Washington Hospital Center in downtown D.C., which houses the National Capital Region's Regional Burn Center. And Dr. Jordan happens to be its director, and Dr. Jang is chief of research. And so from the perspective of all the emergency room doctors in D.C., I've got the third best doctor available to me that knows not only the airway, breathing, circulation things that come with emergency room operations, but he's going to begin to do the very brutal things that come with being a critical burn survivor, with the excisions, beginning their escharotomy and the treatment process. And that's seminal because when Flight 77 crashes in the Pentagon, shortly after that, inside the White House Situation Room, Vice President Cheney will turn to Secretary of Transportation Mineta and tell him to shut down all airspace in the United States. I'll remain at Georgetown for 5 hours. And because of that shutdown of airspace, there's no medevac from the Pentagon to Georgetown. And it is not until about 4 o'clock that afternoon that airspace will be opened up to allow me to be moved from Georgetown to the Washington Hospital Center. Inside that operating room, I'm the only casualty. I have the entire hospital's undivided attention, and I've got the third best emergency room doc that knows what to do with burns in the nation's capital. As I'm wheeled inside, it's like a battle drill. You vets know exactly what I'm talking about, police, fire, all y'all know what I'm describing. Battle drills designed to bring as much order out of chaos as possible, and they were not practicing chaos, they were practicing order, but there was intensity, the voice commands, the various things that are occurring as the team is doing each of their functions that lead to the complete treatment of the person that's been brought in. I know that I'm in that moment that the Lord may have spared my life inside the Pentagon, and that was my first seminal moment of the day, but I'm now at my second, knowing that the question of life or death for the day has not been answered, and that there's a very strong possibility that whatever happens next in those few moments that I still have of lucidity before the anesthesia is applied, I may well be speaking my last words. Dr. Williams comes to the side, and my face is nearly swollen and shut. My eyes are just, I can barely see through the slits in them. I can see in Dr. Williams' eyes the intensity of what he's about to tell me. He says, "Brian, we're going to do the best that we possibly can for you." And I knew in my heart what that meant, that I may very well be speaking my last words. And as I said, the question of life or death hasn't been answered. I asked to do two things. Normally with a burn, if you're wearing jewelry, whether it's a ring, a bracelet, a necklace, if that's a part of the body burn, as the body swells and the jewelry does not, the jewelry becomes a tourniquet, and it normally is cut off of the burn survivor. I didn't want the ring destroyed because there was no opportunity to speak with Mel or Matt beforehand. So I asked for the wedding ring to be taken off my finger, and you can imagine what my hands look like. They look like 5 blackened hot dogs extending from a burnt hamburger called the palm. And Judith Rogers, the OBGYN nurse that answered the all-hands-on-deck call, and just everybody available get to the emergency room and assist where needed. Oh, you'll be happy to know the test for pregnancy came back negative. But when Judith reaches for the ring, she gives it a slight tug. My body, as it's been cooling, has been solidifying and hardening. As she gives it that tug, she degloves the remainder of the ring finger of the left hand. Blood begins streaming out of the base of my palm, but I don't recall it hurting. I'm looking at it and seeing what's happening, and it's a gruesome thing to look at, but I don't remember any physical pain, and I don't think so much because of Dr. Baxter's morphine shot. but because I was concentrating on the dignity and the finality of the death that I knew that I was dying, and saying goodbye to my wife and my son. And then I asked for the hospital chaplain. Chaplain Cirillo came to the right-hand side. We just said that prayer. It wasn't one that, let me figure out what faith I'm going to be as I'm about to step into eternity. It was not that kind of a prayer. It was a prayer that I knew where my Lord and Savior was, and I knew who He was, and I knew where I was going to spend eternity. It was just simply a prayer that acknowledged that, Lord, if you've brought Brian here, and under Dr. Williams' hand and the staff here, that he survives, we'll salute that flag and move out at that mission. But if you've brought Brian here under the care and compassion of his fellow Americans to quietly call him into eternity, we'll salute that flag too. It was a recognition of whose picture hung above the presidents in the chain of command photos of my life and my eternity. And when that prayer was done, it wasn't with the strength of a soldier, it was with the strength of faith in Christ that I could look at Dr. Williams and very laboredly say, let's get on with it. Resting in the comfort of who was really in charge in that operating room. It would tilt my head back, put the mask over my face, and that's an image I will never forget. The anesthesia would be applied, and that would be the first of 39 trips to an operating room to rebuild and reconstruct me that would take 4 years. There are many other challenges. I won't belabor those, it really is a great story of the Lord's grace. But the main thing I wanted you to take from this story isn't, maybe the sick burn humor or the, the cheesy jokes. What I want you to take from that story is the Lord's still in charge, and no matter where our men and women serve, as a veteran, it isn't being on the battlefield in a far distant place and being the guy that pulled the trigger on bin Laden. It isn't being the guy that gets the sexiest accolades for valor. It's every man and woman that has ever put on the uniform of this nation that was willing to put on that uniform. We champion all. We don't champion you simply because you got the highest medals or the Purple Heart. We champion you because you served, because you were willing. And that's really the key word. In John Wayne's final movie, The Shootist, he gives a shooting lesson to Ron Howard. If you recall the movie, John Wayne is a dying gunfighter, dying of cancer. And Ron Howard gets that shooting lesson and shoots almost as well as John Wayne. Ron Howard asks him, how do you come out on top every time you've been in a gunfight? I nearly tied you shooting. And John Wayne's answer is the seminal answer. Even though it's to the character in the movie, it describes veterans. He says, it isn't being the fastest or being the most accurate that counts, it's being willing. I found out early that most men, regardless of cause or need, aren't willing. They blink an eye or draw a breath before they pull that trigger. I won't. In this nation, we still have great men and women that put on the uniform of this nation. And whether they served in peacetime, wartime, or even in wartime, they served sitting in a chair in some office building. Every one of them has been willing. They didn't blink an eye or draw a breath. They pulled that trigger on serving to defend our freedoms. And to you that are veterans, to you that are spouses of veterans, or your sons, or your fathers, or your brothers, uncles, aunts, thank you for the part you played in making sure that this nation receives and maintains its freedom. Thank you so much for your kind welcome. I look forward to just a couple of questions.